In this video, we'll be looking at parts 7 and 8 of our campus Geodatabase project. I'll be doing a demonstration of converting closed polylines to polygons, as well as working with the buildings layer and doing some more digitizing and updating of the data as we go. So you'll see here, I've symbolized my buildings that are in red differently from my roads and lots that are in green. So there's some contrast, and you can see the difference in these two. And so as part of step 6 in the previous video, you were supposed to fix a lot of errors in our roads and lots layer, and even redigitize parts where the campus map and the campus has changed, like this area where there's a new parking lot that was not in the CAD data, as well as this area along the Balsam building, and this area and this new parking lot over here. So there's been a lot of updates to the campus since that CAD data, and so we were updating it to reflect what the campus looks like now based on the most recent imagery, aerial photographs that we have. So it's very important that you end up with a bunch of closed polylines. So if you'll notice up here, this road has been closed off there, and everything is one continuous set of closed polylines. There's no gaps and openings anywhere in this data. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create polygons from this data. So in order to do this, we use a tool called feature to polygon, and I'm going to search for that tool using our little search dialog here. And if I search for feature to polygon, I'll come up with this tool as part of the data management system toolbox. And we can convert these closed polylines to polygons. If you did not get them all perfectly closed, this tool will not work. So one thing to mention about this tool is that it is you have to have an advanced license of ArcGIS to use this tool. I think that is unfortunate that they don't make a tool like this available with the lowest license level, but they do not. As an alternative to doing this, if you had a basic license level of ArcGIS and you needed to perform this kind of task, you could use a free and open source GIS software called QGIS. Used to be called Quantum GIS. Now we call it QGIS. And you can see it here, free and open source geographic information system. This free and open source GIS program has the capability to to create polygons from closed polylines, as well as a lot of other advanced functionality that you can't do at the basic license level of ArcGIS. So be aware of this tool and explore it if you see the need. So I'm going to input the features here. I'm just going to drag over my roads and my lots into here, and it's going to create a new Geodatabase feature class here. Before I do that, let's look at my Geodatabase that I'm putting this in, and see, I'm working with one called campus1.gdb, and this has a campus topology where the buildings and the roads and lots are these two layers, but there's duplicate copies because we moved them up into the feature data set so we could apply some topology rules to them. So I'm going to get rid of this buildings here. We don't need it anymore. And also this one, just so there's no confusion as to what we're working with. You want to be working with these that you've fixed all the errors in your feature data set. So where we have this output layer go, that depends on you and how you want to organize your data. I'm not going to put it in this feature data set. I'm just going to let it go into my database. So I've searched. Here's my feature to polygon tool, and we'll do roads and lots. And you can see I'm going to call it roads lots poly. I don't even remember if I told you exactly what to call it. I don't think I did, but these are going to be, I can't call it roads lots because that's already named. Maybe I call it hardscape is what I called it one time. I'm going to call it parking lots roads. So I'm going to spell it out a little bit, and then these roads and lots is a kind of a intermediate layer that we won't need anymore once we create our new polygon layer. You could put in an XY tolerance that would close gaps based on the XY tolerance. You want to be very careful with that. Typically we don't do that because then the system will move stuff and we want to be in full control. So when I click OK, we'll let it run, and you should see it running down here, and you'll notice that when it finishes, we'll have a new polygon feature class, and it did fill in. I'm going to turn off these roads and lots, and I'm going to turn off the buildings, and you can see that I end up with some features that are not really part of the roads and the lots. So for instance, this big area here in the middle is not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my imagery here to the photo so that we can see what's going on. And I'm going to make this layer a little bit transparent so we can see through it by going to the layer properties here. I just double clicked it. You could also right click it and go to properties. And under the display tab, I'm going to make this thing 70% transparent so that we can see where the buildings are and where the roads are. Now 70% might be a little bit too much. It'd be nice if we could see the lines that delineate these parking lots. So let's try 45. Okay, so now you can kind of see that line there a little bit. And what we want to do is get rid of the polygons that are not roads and parking lots. So I'm going to start an edit session, and I'm going to select polygons that are not part of the roads and parking lots, and I'm going to delete them as I go. Okay, so deleting as I go, deleting as I go. You can hold down the Shift key and select multiple polygons to delete more than one, and you'll see the effect that this starts to have as we move through. This shows the islands. All right, so just running through and getting rid of anything that is not a road or a parking lot. So the way this tool works, when you generate polygons, it generates some polygons of things that are closed polylines that actually are kind of within our campus, but don't actually represent roads and parking lots. So just like that, I'm going to delete those, and you start to see a better representation of what the roads and the parking lots look like here on campus. Okay, so now we're getting a good representation of our campus here. All right. Now you should notice also that we've got some construction going on. This here is the parking deck. This is our new event center. Let's get rid of a little bit more. As I move around, I'm going to hold down my Shift key and select multiple polygons here. Be careful not to select the wrong thing. You don't want to delete the wrong. You don't want to delete the wrong polygons, or you'll be starting all over. One strategy could be to work on a copy of your data, and so in case you did delete the wrong thing and mess up your data, you'd have a copy of it. All right, so moving right along, we're getting all of this worked up. Now you should have created this parking lot here that was not in the CAD data. Some of you neglected to fix some of the parking lots that should have been, so you can work on that during this next part of the project. You can continue to update your layer and make it better better and better as you go. All right, so I'm going to save my edits here. Editor, save edits. That's a very important step. You want to save often. Um, the editing environment can be a computer intensive kind of thing, and if your computer freezes while you do it, you may have to shut down your computer, and you will have hopefully saved recently. All right, so there's our roads and our lots. So from there, the next step that we need to work on is our buildings layer. So I'm going to turn on my buildings layer here, and let's kind of check it out here. Now, this layer that I'm working with, you'll notice this is the Balsam Technology Computer Center, and it has been added as a line, and also some other buildings have been added to mine that you probably don't have in yours, like this building, the Magnolia building. So these buildings are actually connected by this walkway, so it'd probably be better if these were actually connected. So let's split that here, and I'm going to delete this one, and I'm going to double click that, and I'm going to snap that to there, and I'm going to add a new line to my building here. All right, press F2 to finish. All right, so we're moving right along. Now, the next step of this project is to make sure all the buildings are correct, and that's what we're looking at now. So some of these buildings it's hard to enter in because they may not be complete as far as the aerial photos go, and also I'm going to show you a couple of different methods to add buildings. So before we do that, I want to show you how to use what's called a map service, which is a way to stream GIS data across the internet into your map. So previously in our assignment, we downloaded aerial photos from NC1 Map. Now, it can be advantageous to do this because you don't have to have an internet connection to look at the aerial photos, and you have more control over what you can do with the aerial photos. The disadvantage is that you have to download a lot of photos to cover any size area of decent size. So sometimes we'd rather just stream in photos using a map service. Now, you've probably all done this using what's called a base map in our map. Okay, you can add a base map, and you can do something like add imagery, or imagery with labels, or a topographic map. These are all base maps, and they stream this GIS data to you as a map service over the internet. And so we could use this imagery, and the advantage to doing this is you can load this one base map no matter where you are, and you can see imagery really quickly. You don't have to find a source for data and download the data for the area you're mapping. No matter where you're zoomed, this base map of imagery provided by Esri, notice the globe spinning there, shows you base map of where you are. Now, this imagery from Esri is not as updated as the North Carolina imagery. So Esri's continually updating their base data, but the state of North Carolina warehouses their own more current imagery. So this particular base map isn't that useful to us because we need to see these buildings. So I'm going to remove that base map, and I'm going to show you how to load the data from NC1 Map. And so if you go to nc1map.gov, and there's a link to this in the assignment as well, they've got this little news section over here, and you can discover this data through the ortho imagery link and other ways as well. But if you go read about the newest imagery here and click read more, you get their news or their blog site, and you can see the NC1 map 2016 imagery ready for use, and also their URLs were changing for some of their services. That's an important link too. So essentially, to add data like this, you need to know the URL or the website address for where the map service is hosted. So if we look at this link is useful because it describes to you what the different map services you'll see are. There's one called Ortho Imagery 2016. This image service contains only the 2016 coastal imagery. So in the state of North Carolina, we fly the state in 4 parts. Each part of the state gets flown once every 4 years. So in the western part of the state where we are, in western North Carolina, you can expect to have new imagery once every 4 years. And they update it across the state once every 4 years. It's on a 4-year cycle. So I like to use this ortho imagery latest cached because it should give you all the latest imagery available, and it should be cached for better performance. Now that one didn't work when I just tried earlier, so we're going to use ortho imagery all, and it's a time-enabled imagery service containing all of the imagery available from NC1 map. So how do you get to this stuff from here? Well, you need to know the URL for how to get to it. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. If you're using the Esri product, you can load it in from an ArcGIS server. If you are not using the Esri product, if you're using something like QGIS, you need to use a different type of map service, one like a WMS, web mapping service, that you can see here. So this would be the URL you would use to do a WMS service. Now, if you just click on one of these, you'll see the URL for an ArcGIS server. So this is an ArcGIS specific URL. Notice it's called an ArcGIS REST services directory. And so if this is the URL we need, I'm going to copy that URL, and I'm going to go to ArcMap and add that in. Now remember this WMS server here too, because I'm going to show you where to add that into ArcGIS as well if you wanted to. So let's go to our catalog window here, and I'm going to collapse some of these things so you can see a little bit better. Notice there's a GIS servers area here, and if I expand that, I can add all kinds of GIS servers. This WMS server, we could add a WMS map service like we would have to do in a non-Esri product. Since we're working in an Esri product, we can add an ArcGIS server. If you were an administrator or someone with a user account on the server where this data is published, like an NC1 map employee, you could publish or administer the services. But we just want to use the GIS services, and they make it available for anyone to use. You do not need a username or a password, and you just need the server's URL here. And so I'm going to paste it in, and again, no username and password, and click finish. And it takes a second, but here it is. There's services on NC1 map. If I expand it, you'll see a lot of stuff. And it's kind of neat because any of their services that they publish, you can see here. Land cover, hydrography, energy, education. So this is a good way to stream GIS data into your map without locally hosting the data. So we want to look at the imagery, and feel free to explore the rest of this if you'd like. So here's some historic imagery from 95, 93, some hurricane imagery, and what I want to use is the ortho imagery all. I said the latest cache would be good to use because it should be cached for best performance, but it didn't work earlier. So I'm just going to drag this over, click close, and it takes a minute. That's the disadvantage. The other disadvantage is that is not what we need. What I should have got is the latest, I believe. Notice that this imagery is also not updated to show buildings. So I'm going to remove that one, and we're going to load the latest. And that should show us the latest imagery they have. Now this looks just like the image you downloaded. It's essentially the same thing. But again, sometimes this has advantages to use. It takes a little bit longer to draw, but you don't have to figure out which ones you need and download them all. They're just available to you right there. All right, so that's working with the map service from NC1 Map. Now, our job is to update the buildings layer based on a couple of different things. One thing we're going to be using to update the imagery is the aerial photo. The other thing that we're going to use, and this is linked in your assignment, is our campus map. Now, this map could be a little better in my humble opinion as a cartographer and GIS professional, but it does a pretty good job. Our marketing folks make it. It's not something that I really want to take on here to try and be responsible for the campus map, as it's just not really part of my job when I'm spending my time as an instructor. However, this will give you a good idea of the current state of the buildings, the building number and the building name. We're going to need that to put in our attribute table. Also, where the buildings are. Now, north is not up on this map. This is actually south, going down to Meadow Road this way, and this is kind of going sort of north towards Mission Hospital. So some of the newer buildings are 24, which is our new Ferguson Center for Allied Health and Workforce Development. Building 8 here is our Komen Student Activity Center. Building 2 is the Boston Computer Technology Center, and 12 there is Magnolia. So there's some new buildings. Even 23 is our new Roberson building. So we're going to use this map to add some buildings in. Now, let me show you two different ways to do this. We've got a couple of different things we are going to want to do with our buildings. Oh yeah. Secondly, this building is gone. That building is our old azalea building, and it's been torn down, or rhododendron. I mean, that building was rhododendron, and it has now been removed. So, from your data, let me show you a couple of different ways to do this. Now, eventually, we're going to want to build out our data in 3D, and some buildings have different building heights. So when a building has a different building height, like for instance, this building. See how you can see the shadows on these are little parts that stick up above the rest of the building. Same for here. This part of this roof is higher than these two, and different than that as well. So some of these buildings have different heights to them based on different floors and levels, and we need to represent each area that may have a different height with a different polygon. So we could go through and we could add lines in for all of these areas. Now there's some error associated with the aerial photos too, so just do the best you can. I'd prefer that you just be consistent, but let's digitize along the top of the buildings. Now I'm going to go in and save my edits again real quick because I thought my computer was just about to freeze, and I don't want that. So I'm going to reshape this to be more along the top of the building. Now if you just need to move one vertex, you can just grab a vertex and you can move it. See, you can kind of move a vertex at a time to make it represent the building a little bit better. All right. So that's looking better in that little area. There's also on my editor toolbar a reshape tool. And so if you've got a bunch of parts to reshape, that's easier. So you have to select the feature you want to reshape, choose your reshape tool, and then I'm going to just draw. Now, if it snaps where you don't want it to snap, hold down your space key. That disables snapping. Click there, space bar, disable snapping. And then I'm going to just double click outside the line here, and it should reshape that. And that did something really weird. So I'm going to Control Z and undo that. It did that because there are multiple lines there, I believe. So there's a line and here's a line. So I'm going to merge all these into one line. Let's just merge them. It doesn't matter which I choose. They don't have it. If you wanted to retain the attributes from one feature, you could choose the one you wanted to keep, but in this case, it doesn't matter. Now I'm going to go back to reshape and try this again. That's not reshape. That is. I'm going to hold down my space bar so it doesn't snap there. Let's see if that works a little bit better. Nope, it did something weird again. So sometimes based on the way the direction lines are drawn, if lines aren't drawn all in the same direction, it'll do weird things. So let's try and just do that part, just to reshape that. All right, so it reshaped that one. And now let's try and reshape this one. I'm going to go to there and there. Yeah, see, that line was drawn the opposite direction. So I'm going to Control Z to undo that. And in this case, it's probably better just to move a couple vertices to get it right. Now, see, that's one of the problems. There's more than one vertex in there. Not sure why. I'm going to delete that vertex. Delete that vertex. See, there's a bunch of vertices right there for some reason, and I don't know why. All right, I got rid of them all now. Yeah, that's doing weird things. So, you can do this by lines, or we can do it by polygons. For now, let's just add another line here. So some of this stuff, it takes some work to make it what you want. And sometimes one technique works better than others, and sometimes a different technique would work better. Okay, so that building's looking pretty good. Now that building all has the same building height. Now also that building, these buildings connect, so these lines should connect. So in this case, I'm going to split that line. Whoops, I didn't mean to do it there, so I'll Control Z to undo that. Select that. I'm going to split this right there. And that line, I'm going to split right there so that I can get rid of this line in between the buildings. Why? Because that line, these buildings connect, so I want these to connect. This would be a better way to model this. And now when I generate polygons, it's going to generate one for this and one for this. Those buildings connect. My office is actually right here, and there's a hallway that goes between these two buildings. So the buildings connect in the real world. We want them to connect here. Same thing for here. See how this is built, and this is one of your fellow students' work, and he did a great job. But I'm going to fix a few of these things. He went a little bit above and beyond, and he added some of these buildings in the last step when we actually didn't have to add them yet. But it's fine, he did. I'm going to connect that there, and I'm going to move that there. All right, so I'm getting this built out now. All right, now since this building has these different building heights, this is one strategy. You could add in the building detail as line work before you convert to polygons. And so I'm going to add in a line there, double click, I'm going to add in a line there, make sure and snap to that, and go all the way to here, double click, and I'm going to come across to there, not perfect, but it's good enough, come across to there, double click, okay. Now I also want to fix this real quick. I'm going to grab that one and snap it there. I'm going to move this one, zoom in as much as you need to there. Remember your scroll mouse lets you zoom in. Now, there's a lot of editing to do, so do the best job you can. You're not going to be perfect, and that's okay for this example. For learning how to use the tools, it would take forever to make it perfect. So do the best you can. All right, now notice how I delineated this building using lines, and you'll see when I generate polygons from that what it does. It's actually a little bit easier to do it that way, but I want you to do some as polygons so that you can see the polygon tools as well. This building, for instance, has all these different interesting places to generate. I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and I'm going to put a rectangle right there for that gap. Double click. See, that doesn't do a great job, but for this, that's good enough. Then I'm going to go draw some lines in here, and I'm going to come down to there and to there and double click. And then I'm going to go there, there, and there, and then all the way to there and double click. So see how I'm building out where it looks like there's these different building heights throughout this building. Okay. Now I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to save my edits, and I'm going to generate polygons from this buildings layer. I need to stop editing, and then I'm going to show you how to do what we were doing with lines with the polygons as well. So again, I need to use my feature to polygon tool, and this time I'm going to use my buildings, and I'm going to call my new you could call it feature to polygon. I'm just going to let it call it building underscore polygon. I'm going to take the defaults for all the rest of that and just click OK. And here you'll see what happens. There's all my buildings. Now, again, this building they're connected, so that's not a great representation there. This building polygon, I'm going to make it a little bit transparent as well, and I'm going to change the symbol a bit to a different color, maybe something like that we can really distinguish. All right, so there it is. Okay, now once they're polygons, the polygon layer is what we want. Notice it did not generate a polygon from that building. I don't know why. It was not closed is why, but I don't know where it was not closed. So we'll get rid of that and just create a new building there. And I'll show you some tools to do that. Okay, so once you have it polygons, once you have buildings as polygons, we need to add a couple of attributes. One, building name, and another, building number. So from the attribute table, as long as you're not in an edit session, you can add fields. That's also something we can do in our catalog. So let's minimize this and this. Look at my folder connections for this project in my AB Tech folder. There's my building polygon layer that was just created. And what I want to do is add a couple of fields to this. So right now it's got your regular shape length and shape area fields that all polygon feature classes have. And in the assignment, we tell you to add a couple of new fields to this feature class. So the fields that we want to add are building number and building name. Now, In this case, just calling it name is good. That's a text field. And notice down here the properties of this field. 50 is the length. So if you look at some of the building names from our campus map, you want to determine the longest building name. Is it more or less than 50 characters? So what's the longest one? Probably Ferguson. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 18. I'd say let's just 50 would probably work, but we might as well bump it up a hair. Okay, let's just make it 70 to make sure that we have enough characters. And then the building number. Now, I'm going to call it B underscore number for building underscore number. I could say build number. I think number is a reserved field that it will not allow you to name one number. So we're going to call it B number. Now, most people would think, well, building number, that should be a number type field. You have different choices for what types of data you're going to store. Short and long integers are whole numbers with no decimal places. A short integer can have up to 7 significant digits, 32,000 plus. I don't know the exact number, it's right around 32,000. If your number is going to be bigger than 32,000, you need to use a long integer. Short integers for numbers less. Float and double are the same for numbers that hold decimal places. Doubles for really long numbers with decimal places. Text, dates, and some other choices. A lot of people would say, well, building number, shouldn't that be a number, like an integer or a float? Well, not when it's a number that's like an ID field. You really only want to use numbers if you want to perform some kind of math on the field. So if you wanted to look at the average of the building numbers, building 100 and building 200, what's the average of those numbers? You don't ever want to do that. So text is fine. And you also will often see things like 12A or building 13C. So if a building number has a letter in it, you cannot store a letter in a text in a letter in a number field, but you can store a number in a text field. So we're just going to call it text, and the building numbers are if I can find the building numbers are small numbers, 1 through 24. So 50 is way too many characters. We don't really need 50 characters. So we're going to just say, let's just make it 6 characters in case the buildings grow, but the building numbers grow, but 6 should be plenty. Okay. So here we are. We've got, if we look at our building polygon, if I open the attribute table, we've got building name and building number. Okay, so we need to populate these things as we go. So let's just look at the number 1, Thomas W. Simpson Administration Building. I'm going to copy that text and look at that building. That's the Simpson building. And that is this building right here. Now, let's look a little bit closer at this building and try and figure out if it's got some different heights to it. And that building looks like it's all the same. And that's not a perfect representation, but that's good enough for us for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start editing. And I'm going to select that building. I'm going to open my attribute table. And I'm going to paste that name in there. Thomas W. Simpson. It didn't copy at all for some reason, did it? Administration building. All right, and it is building 1. And that building is updated. Just like that. Now, notice that spinning. What's a good thing to do when this finishes spinning? And hopefully it does. I just clicked. I have my edit tool on there. and I clicked here beside it, and we want to save our edits often again. Now, saving your map here is not the same as saving your edits, so make sure and do both. Now, I think it's selecting, yeah, my ortho imagery underneath the bottom. So you got to be careful when you select away from a building, because this ortho imagery, it's got this grid on it that gets selected, and it can take it a long time and do weird things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to toggle this layer so it's not selectable. And so then I can't select it. Now it doesn't do that because it won't select that one. Okay, so let's look at this building. Now, this building is our Ferguson Auditorium, and it does have some different building heights that we need to separate this out into 1, 2, 3, 4 polygons. Now, these could have been added as lines. If you added a line across here and 2 lines across here before you converted to polygons, then you wouldn't have to do what I'm about to do. But I want to show you how to do it with polygons. So how do we make 4 polygons out of this 1 polygon? We can select the polygon and we can cut the polygon. So what I want to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut it across to there, double click, and it splits it in 2. Then I need to select the one that I want to split, and I can split this one. Okay. Select the one I want to split. Sometimes it'll let you have 2 selected and still let you split. Sometimes it gets confused as to what you're splitting. I think this will still work. It does. So now I have 4 polygons. Okay. These are all the same building. Okay. They are all the Ferguson building. So let's look at this and see. That is the Ferguson building. It's actually our auditorium. We've got a couple of different Ferguson buildings. This is Ferguson building 7 there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all 4 of those polygons. And now if I open my attribute table, you'll see that I've got that polygon, that polygon, that polygon, and that polygon. So if I select this top level here, I can add Ferguson building and building 7. And what it does is it updates all of them. Let me just select one. So see that 1 is Ferguson building 7, Ferguson building 7, Ferguson building 7, Ferguson building 7. Okay, so that's one strategy there. Now, when you've got a polygon, when you've got an area that's kind of within another polygon, it's kind of like would be a donut there. We do this a slightly different way. And I'm going to show you a different strategy for inputting the attributes as well. So this building is number 8. It's number 6, the Don C. Locke Library. I'm going to copy that. It's building 6. It's this one. So I'm going to give this the attribute Don C. Locke Library, building 6. So that whole polygon got those attributes. Now, when I split the polygon, the attributes get duplicated. So if you enter in the attributes before you start, I call it slicing and dicing the building polygons, it just duplicates them. So that's kind of an easy way to handle that, is by entering in the attributes first. So this part actually goes up, and this is kind of a dome, but we're not gonna model the dome really well, but it does have a different height. All right, now these areas in the middle, these are interesting, and how we handle them is that we draw a polygon on top of that, and then we erase out the polygon for the area that is in common below. So this is a pretty useful strategy, especially if you needed to create a donut hole in a polygon. In this case, we're going to leave the polygon that we create. We don't need a donut hole, but let me just show you how to do this. So with our create features here, I'm going to drag that over to my other screen. My building polygon, I need a rectangle. I'm going to do that. Double click. Now, notice if I move this, Now, it's hard to select polygons on top of polygons. It's selecting the one below because they overlap. When that happens, if you press the N key on your keyboard, it'll toggle to the next closest feature. And I'm going to grab that and I'm going to move it. So it's a polygon on top of a polygon. I'm going to put it right where it goes. Now, what I can do with the editor is under the editor drop down, I can clip. And what this is going to do is clip one feature based on another feature. Now, this is different than the geoprocessing task clip, which clips one layer based on another layer. This is clipping features within the same layer. You can actually use so let's clip and see what options we get. The buffer distance, we don't want it to buffer out. We want it to be a perfect clip, and we want to discard the area that the selected polygon intersects. So when I click OK, you'll see it flash, a little flash there. And now if I move this, notice there's nothing under it. So I'm going to Control Z to move it right back where it goes. And then I'm going to draw one here, a rectangle, and with it selected, I'm going to editor, clip, no buffer distance, discard the area that intersects that selected polygon and the polygon layer below it, and click OK. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. I'm going to Control Z to get rid of it. Now, the one thing that I will caution you about clipping polygons, if I had my campus boundary turned on, my AB Tech parcels, and I did the similar clip function there. Notice how my buildings are starting to look a little bit better there. Now, let's merge that in with this layer. I'm going to select these two, and I'm going to merge them together. And it wants to know keep attributes from one or the other. All right, so now, if you had your building layer turned on, and I'm going to make it where I can't select it, turn off my AB Tech. If you had your campus boundary, and you drew a polygon on your buildings layer, and I realize I'm not looking exactly where this is. Now, if I were to clip this and discard the area that it intersects, notice what will happen here. If I turn off my buildings layer, it clips that underlying property boundary, campus boundary layer. So you don't want any layers underneath that you don't want to affect. So I'm going to edit, undo. I'm going to edit, undo, create, edit, undo, merge. And let's look and see here. All right, so I'm back to where I was there. And I'm going to turn off this layer because I don't want that to happen again. Now, notice that this polygon here is the Don Seelock library. Notice that polygon is the Don Seelock library. Notice that polygon is the Don Seelock library. Now, this polygon is selected, but this little interior one is not selected. It looks like it's selected because it has those coincident lines that is shared between the polygon around the outside of it. So I'm going to select that polygon, and notice that it didn't get those attributes because it wasn't part of the original polygon, and so I need to add attributes to it. Now I could type them in, but another strategy is to copy the attributes from that polygon that surrounds it and then paste them there. So just another way to get some attributes, and we need to give that one the same attributes. All right, the Don Seelock library. So that starts to help you to build out your buildings in an appropriate way. And what we're going to do next week is assign elevations to each one of these polygons based on LiDAR data, their elevation point clouds, and that will allow us to extrude our buildings in 3D and have a pretty nice effect for a 3D building polygon. So you're going to need to continue your work with these buildings, and you're not going to be able to do this to all of them, but you'll need to modify this building some and this building. So um, if you go on and give attributes to this building before you do something like this to it. All right. So you can see what I'm doing there by cutting these polygons. So you can add some lines in before you convert into polygons. This is our new healthcare building. It's got a lot of things to work with, and that's our Roberson building. So that's moving right along to get this thing built out. When you finish, you should have your parking lots this week. Your parking lot should be finished, and your buildings should be finished. Every building polygon should have an attribute of name and number, and your parking lots should not have attributes. Now, I do want to mention your notice that the parking lots do have numbers. There's B7 and B3 and B2 and A13 and A19. We could split our parking lots layer up and add that attribute. We're not going to do that as part of this project. We like the nice seamless flow of our roads and our parking lots. In most GIS databases and most GIS projects, you may have multiple representations of one data set, like these parking lots. Maybe you have one representation that shows them split with the different actual parking lot numbers and names. And another layer you would have is one continuous layer. And when you end up with two layers like that, it can be difficult to manage when you need to update one, then you have to update another. But those are the kind of things that the topology tools can help you manage two layers to make sure they stay coincident when you're updating one and the other one's updated. Okay, again, make sure you save as you go. Save your edits. I'm going to stop editing. And you should have a pretty nice buildings and parking lot campus built out by the end of the week. If you're having any problems, please contact me. Save your map document as well. Remember that saving your map document is not the same thing as saving your edits. Those two saves save two different things. So please let me know if you have any questions.